I want to talk about a woman that I loved and adore, Maureen Mulvaney, my mom. Now, my mom was just such a special person in my life, but she didn't start off with an easy life. You see, when she was a baby, she was one of those happy babies. Everybody loved to be around because she moved. She was just an active baby until at 18 months, she developed the dreaded infantile paralysis, which we later know was polio. Now, at this time in history, there was no cure. As a matter of fact, they didn't even know what caused polio. So many people at that time were terrified of polio, didn't want to know anybody that had polio, and if you had somebody in your family that had polio, they were shunned and put to the side. My mother, she didn't have that happen to her in her own family, but not so much with outside the family. When my grandmother found out that she had polio, she raced her to the hospital. She did everything she could. And at that time in history, they didn't know what to do. So the first month of her life, she was put in an iron lung. And my grandparents had to come into the room dressed in garb from beginning to end, so that there would be no germs that would get to this baby. And for the next 12 years of her life, my mother was in and out of the hospital. Meantime, my grandmother's family grew and grew and grew, so that my mother had 7 brothers and sisters. Well, don't you know, every day that my grandmother would come to the hospital, my mother, instead of being crying and whining about it, she would say, "I'm praying today that I can walk. One day, my prayer is that I will be able to walk." And my grandmother would say to her every day, "You must find joy in everything around you. I want you to look out the window and see the men mowing the lawn, and take joy in that. Talk to the other children. Wave to the parents that come by to visit everyone, because I've got 7 brothers and sisters, and I can't come to the hospital every day. So we're going to have to pray every day that God will give you the strength to get you through this, and perhaps one day you'll be able to walk." And everybody knew my mother, knew that that was her prayer. Her doctor finally comes in after 25 operations on her leg. The doctor finally comes in and he says to my mother, "We'd like to try one more time." Any other kid would have said, "Oh my gosh, you've operated on me 25 times, Cat, and it's enough." Not my mother. She took his face in her hands and she said, "I pray every day that one day I'll be able to walk. And if you think you can make me walk, please operate as soon as possible." The doctor went out in the hall and he cried. He sobbed because he'd never seen anybody so brave and so true to their word. And so sure enough, what he did was he operated on her. And he put her foot in a walking position, and he fused her ankle so that it couldn't go sideways, but it could only go front and back. And she was able to walk. For the first time in her life, after 25 operations, she was finally getting out of the hospital so that she could go home and play with her brothers and sisters just like other kids, so that she would be able to wear a pair of shoes. Although one foot was one size and the other foot was the other size, and it was very expensive to buy her shoes because they had to buy 2 pairs and throw a pair away. They did. And for the first time in her life, she walked without braces. She walked without being in a wheelchair. She walked without crutches. And she was so proud. And so she gets home, and she'd been in the hospital for 12 years of her life. She didn't know what it was like on the outside. She didn't know that the other children might not be as excited that she could walk as she was. So one day, my grandmother was in the house with her, and my mother begged, "Ma, please let me go down and show Aunt Celia my brand new shoes. Let me show her how I can walk." My grandmother knew that other people could be cruel, and she said, "No, dear. Your brothers and sisters aren't here now to protect you. So there's nobody here." And my mother begged and begged and begged, and finally my grandmother relented. She said, "Now you be careful, take your time, take all the time you need to walk down the hill, and I'll be watching you out the window." So as my mom departed the house, my grandmother swelled with pride that she was so excited to see her daughter walk with her own legs without the crutches. And sure enough, she got out of sight when all of a sudden the neighborhood kids came. And so they gathered round my mother, and they started mocking her, and they started calling her names, skinny leg, crippled, and all of these kinds of things. Well, my mother was frightened. She'd never heard this before. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know if they were going to hurt her. So she did what anybody would do. She tried to run. But they were pretty much new legs and pretty much new shoes, and she couldn't do it. And sure enough, she took those first few steps, and down she went. She fell to the ground, and the kids, they picked up stones, and they started to stone my mother. And had my Aunt Celia not walked out of her house and shooed the kids away, my mother could have been hurt very, very badly. And my aunt picked her up and brushed her off. And you know, it's really interesting because I say this all the time. We say that old childhood rhyme, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. Well, I'm here today to tell you that it's the exact opposite. Sticks and stones, those bruises go away very, very rapidly. But the names stick with you the rest of your life. Crippled, you know, diseased one, limpy leg, and those things stay with you. Unless you have someone in your life that believes in you. Even scientific studies have shown if one person says, I believe in you, you can have a major change in your life. And for my mother, it was her parents. Every day her mother would say, me dear, you have polio, but you're just like everyone else. And I believe in you. I believe you can do whatever you set your mind to do. And don't let these names stick with you, because you are the one that determines your destiny. And so today we talk about bullying all the time. And it's the words that we say. It's the way that we say. You know, oftentimes we say it's the other kids bullying each other. But how many times have we said things like, hurry on down that line? How many times have we said things like, David, I said stop that. David, I said don't do this. And the minute you call a kid's name out, the very first time, I guarantee you what you have done, as you are the authority figure, you have just given permission for every other child to do the same. So we must make a decision right here and now that the words we speak every single day matter. And when words matter, you have to make sure that your words are kind and they're loving. Because my mother had someone that believed in her, she was able to go on and do great things in her life. But how many children, how many kids, how many adults go along and nobody believes in them? So make the shift. And the shift should be to say to other kids, I believe in you. If one teacher had said to Susan Boyle when she was coming down that line, I believe in you. Can you imagine? She must have been singing every single time she came down that line. And if we had just said, I believe in you, imagine how different her life would have been. Instead of 45 years waiting to get on the stage, at 47 actually, to be on the stage for Britain's Got Talent. If we as teachers, if we as adults, if we as a school food service, if we have transportation, as we of maintenance, if we of all the school systems, if we had acted as if we were a comprehensive education machine, that we made a decision that there would only be sweet words that came out of our life, out of our mouth, that lifted our students up, that gave them hope. And hope should be thought of as hope is helping others prosper every day. Prosper in their relationships, prosper in their strength and what they know and how to succeed. That's how we're going to move the school systems forward. So let's make a shift right now and use the sweet words that my mother mentioned all the time. She always said, oh, my little love, so good to have you in the line today. You're coming back tomorrow. And she would say that every single time because she was a magnificent lunch lady. And because she was a lunch lady, it was one of those things that everybody admired her. She helped to raise the IQ of the school because she could say, I can see the brains just hanging out of your head right now. She would say the kindest things to these kids, and they responded. And she never once had to say, hurry on down that line, because she would just use kind words. Oh, I can see you just love learning. And because of that, they couldn't wait to get in front of her. So the line moved very fast because everybody wanted to be in front of her. So make the shift. Make the shift. Go from using words that are hurtful, that are put downs. Instead, let's lift. If your words do not lift, inspire, or motivate, don't say them.